Okay, morning everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Gemma and Matt's LadyBird Guide to Digital Media. They recently held a talk in our offices in Norwich, and the feedback we received was incredible. So we thought about bringing them back again. The talk should last about 45 minutes. Any questions that you have, if you just pop them in the Q&A section, and then we'll come to those at the very end. Right, Matt and Gemma, over to you.
Great, thanks, Shani. So, digital media, it's such a broad topic, and there are so many acronyms to wade through to try and understand what on earth probably we're talking about as digital marketing professionals, and that can be very, very intimidating. Just to reassure you, we're not going to be doing a talk for 45 minutes about lots and lots of jargon, and if we do, hopefully we'll explain what on earth we're talking about. So I just want to kind of start off with throwing the acronyms to the side and actually then kicking off with what we're actually going to talk about.
Something else that we want to achieve as well is, as digital marketers and brand marketers, we work quite well. We work often together. And we want to make sure that we get across that message in this talk today. And we are the same. We usually have the same goals, and we usually have quite similar processes. So we're going to cover that today as well. So yes, welcome to our webinar. My name is Matt Maisie. I'm the head of SEO at Fountain.
My name's Gemma, and I'm head of paid media at Fountain Partnership. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, first of all, as Matt alluded to, we're going to talk about our similarities with other facets of marketing, who we're targeting, and then how we actually go about targeting them using digital channels. How do we measure success? And then there'll be an opportunity to answer some questions at the end if there's anything that you would really, really love to know.
Great. So starting with the bare fundamentals of what we do. So starting with SEO, what is it? So search optimization is basically an activity that we do to optimize websites so they are more relevant and have a better experience for people that visit those websites. And the product of that is greater visibility organically on the search engines.
And paid media is basically any form of paid for ads. So this includes social media like Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok, search. So that's probably raining on SEO's parade a little bit and having little ads above the organic search results. Things like display. So we're talking about banner ads, video or affiliates, really anything that requires you to pay some sort of media spend to a publisher or some sort of website in order to run ads.
And as I mentioned at the very start, as digital marketers and brand marketers, we work in the same way, we think in the same way, and we have the same goals. So what we've done with this presentation in parts is we've kind of tried to structure it like we would when it comes to a new client or an existing client. So hopefully that comes across as we present this.
So digital marketing is more than just performance marketing. I think we're often in a situation where you probably hear digital marketers talk about leads and cost per lead and how many sales they've got and revenue. And of course, all of those things are the most important thing. Ultimately, it's what's the value that the person that you're doing the work for or the company that you work for, what's the value that marketing is driving? That's really what the heart of performance marketing is. However, digital marketing can do more than that, and actually it can really support. Has anyone ever actually heard of your brand? And there's ways that you can get that across outside of, I suppose, traditional channels like TV and whatnot. And I think what's really interesting is that if we look at this stat here, where 36% of channels deliver for both revenue and brand metrics, what we're saying here is that actually you don't necessarily need to do one thing to deliver sales and revenue and leads and whatnot. You can actually potentially use things like social media and other channels, and there is in some cases a crossover when it comes to what you're trying to achieve. And equally, for brands who add that kind of upper funnel activity, and again, that is a bit of an acronym alert, but it's effectively marketing to people who've never actually heard of you, and thinking about whether you're trying to establish the problem. So you've got a problem, we'd like to solve it for you, or you've got a problem, we're the people that can help you solve it. Putting that message across. Actually, if people who add that into their existing campaigns, where they're then trying to get them to consider them as a brand, actually people see up to a 70% increase in ROI, so return. So basically they see more value from actually running campaigns all the way through from I've never heard of you, all the way through to, oh, look at all the great things about our company, this is why you should consider using us. So I think that's really, really interesting, and it goes to show how valuable digital marketing, performance marketing can be. But the core of this is that a great brand strategy does make our jobs a damn sight easier. And the reason for that is because we can really, really establish why you're different, why you're great, why somebody might use you as a company. And that really helps us to pick out all of those elements when we're writing ads, when we're thinking about the channels that might suit. That's really where it just makes things so much better. It's not to say everybody has that. I obviously completely get that, but it is certainly a joy when somebody does have that box ticked. And fundamentally, we ask the same question. So what's really, really interesting is when we were researching this, we were looking at how brand marketers and other kind of areas of marketing start. And actually, it's asking, what does success look like? What are you looking to achieve? Trying to get under the bonnet of a company and understand about them, their customers, who they serve, and what the customer service is like. What's the process to go through from when you get in touch all the way through to buying from them? Digging into all of that stuff, it's really something that's fundamental to anything when it comes to marketing, not just digital marketing, which of course is really valuable to know. And as you said, asking that really big question, what does success look like? We all start with the end in mind. Obviously, what success looks like for a brand campaign or a brand marketer may well be very different to what success looks like for us, because we're kind of focusing on potentially sales and revenue, but ultimately it might be ensuring that more people have heard of your brand, or more people are engaging with your content, or whatever it may be. Understanding what the goals are is absolutely imperative, no matter what it is you're trying to do or what you're trying to achieve. And the big thing about digital marketing is that we have data. So actually, and arguably sometimes too much of it, although obviously, as I'm sure you appreciate, that landscape is changing a little bit, which is always exciting. But fundamentally, we do have access to a lot of information, and that is, well, data is our friend, as it says here. But the benefit of that data is that it can actually influence brand and business decisions. Now, what we mean by that is that actually it can validate whether we've gone in the right direction with something. It validates whether people are actually reading that ad copy, whether it's influencing them to buy, and it can really help determine which messaging works. And say, for example, you want to test 2 different offers, and it can tell you whether actually does running offers then mean that you're going to end up with customers that stay with you for longer, or does it actually mean the opposite? You get a customer through the door with an offer, and actually, unfortunately, they're less valuable to you as a business. They then, once the offer's expired, they go off and go and chase an offer somewhere else. So it can really help you to understand what's truly going to drive sales, revenue, profitability, etc., which I think is really, really important. And that's the value that we can bring to a brand, brand marketer and other sort of areas of marketing as well.
Great. So moving on to sort of the process that we go through with a new client or an existing client. And it always starts with finding out who we're targeting and why. So throughout this, we're going to use one of our lovely clients as an example. So Hannah is the first company in the UK to offer the contraceptive pill over the counter. And we started with these guys right at the beginning, so before the product launch. So we thought this would be a really good example of how we do things. And then we also work very closely with some excellent brand marketers as well. So So hopefully this is a really great example of how we do things here. I wanted to start off by saying this, and this is really important. So although I explained earlier about search engines and SEO, how, optimizing websites means that we rank higher in search engines, quite a lot of people go wrong by optimizing for search engines and not people. And here at Fountain, we are very much about people first. And the more we understand about people, the more we can optimize for them rather than search engines. And in theory, if you optimize for people, you get better results anyway. So yeah, moving on. Great. So when we find out who, or when we try to find out who we're targeting, we go through a two-pronged attack. The number one place we start, and this is mainly for SEO, but also does include paid as well, is we start with a keyword strategy. And that I'll go into in a bit more detail in a second. And then secondly, we then look at the audiences and how we target those. So starting off with the keyword strategy, as an SEO, it's really, well, as a paid person as well, it's really important that we really find out what people's search intent is. So what do I mean by that? So every time we go onto Google, whether we know it or not, we've always got some sort of intention behind what we search, whether that's something we want to find out more about a product, whether we're looking for a review, whether we just want to buy that product. There's always something behind what we search. And it's a big job for us to sort of figure out what that intention is behind those search queries. And by understanding that, we can then tailor the content around those intentions. And then people ultimately have content and a website that is much more relevant to their search. This kind of goes hand in hand, and it's pretty obvious point as well, is that obviously you want to be looking at keywords and topics that are actually relevant to your product and your business. So we fish out the keywords and things that people are searching that are just totally irrelevant to your business. Yeah, because it makes sense, right? There's no point us spending time and money on that. And ultimately, you're not going to get a website ranking for something that's not relevant to what it's offering. So that's, again, another big thing that we do to sort of whittle down our audience.
And when it comes to paid media, obviously taking into account the first 2 points that Matt's raised, which obviously are incredibly important no matter what search, whether you're doing organic or or paid search, but the kind of resurgence of broad match has really changed the game, I guess, when it comes to paid search. And what broad match basically does is back in I don't know 10-ish years ago, when you were building, I suppose, a paid search campaign, what you would do is you would have to use all these different, I guess you would have to bid on the exact term, the exact words that you wanted somebody to search, and then an ad appear. So it was really specific, and you had to really think about that. And broad match has changed that, in that understanding the search intent and what's relevant, it can match things that mean similar or the same thing. So what it actually does is it uses a significant amount more data and signals to decide when one of your ads is shown. So it means that there's a much wider range of search things that people can search for that will actually trigger your ad. Now, obviously, with great power comes great responsibility, because it's not always, sometimes it's great and sometimes it needs a little bit of reining in, and we do have the power to be able to do that. But broad match presents a really interesting challenge, and it does have some knock-on effects as well. So I think moving on to I suppose the other sort of side of this, which is, as I said, a long time ago, you would need to add every single different variation of a phrase. So for example, I mean, I used to work for a car hire broker a long time ago, but say car hire in Spain, you would have to add car hire Spain, Spain car hire, all the different ways around of saying that. which is ridiculous really, because they all mean exactly the same thing, and even plural, so even down to using, adding an S on the end, etc. You'd have to do all that. You really don't need to do that anymore, because broad match will cover all of that and more. So in theory, that car hire, car rental, because it means the same thing, in theory that should work, but it's always been an interesting one. But what this actually leads to is simpler keyword strategies. And I think with more and more AI being built into even the campaign builds and the way that works, our role kind of changes a little bit, in that we're basically sense checking and making sure that we're guiding that to show ads in the right situations, because we do have what's called negative keywords, where we can basically control and say, don't show an ad if somebody searches for this, because equally there can be things that mean similar things but actually aren't what we're trying to market. So I think and yet exact isn't really exact anymore. So obviously, using Hannah as the example here, if you think about the contraceptive pill, is a really interesting one, because you've got the pill, the contraceptive pill, the mini pill. There's so many different ways to say the same thing. And like I said previously, we would have had to have added all of those different variants. And I mean, to some degree, we still do. But actually, even our biggest ally, Exact Match. So I want to show an ad if somebody searches for buy the pill, for example. Even that now, there are various different close variants, if you like, variations that people could search for, and then an ad would show. So sadly, I don't think it'll be that long before we say goodbye to Exact Match. I mean, not really Exact Match anymore anyway. So I suppose it's not too sad, but yeah, it's a shame that some of the tools that we had in our tool belt do slowly get deprecated, but in the way that search changes. And I think Google always say, was it 15% of search queries every day are brand new? I mean, they've been saying that for 10 years, so I'm sure it can't still be true. It's probably more with the way that people search now. And because they're more, there's a lot more detail, and I think the way it's moving will be different. So broad match will be a really powerful tool as people search, the way people search changes, and I think as things evolve.
And I think that's a really important point for SEO as well, because I think, again, a few years ago, we would be very laser focused on sort of ranking for every single variant of a keyword, a bit like what you're just saying, Gemma. But that's just not the case anymore. And it's just, again, going back to the people first perspective. If we were to create some content to try and rank for every single variant of the contraceptive pill, like the content would just be awful, and people would just go on the website and it would just be rubbish. And just almost worded for a search engine, not a person. So SEO is very similar. It's almost optimizing for a topic rather than specific keywords. And then we perhaps measure the success of that by looking at individual sort of keyword rankings and seeing how they improve over time. So paid and SEO keyword strategies have to be they have to complement each other right from the off, as we've already mentioned, and hopefully we've kind of said, it's super important. It means that we as a team right from the beginning are working together. It means in theory the campaign is much more commercially led, and ultimately clients are much more happier. So a couple of examples of that. So let's say, taking Hannah as an example, the keyword birth control pills online, the cost per click is around £8. So that's quite a lot. And as an average for looking at sort of other keywords within the Hannah campaign, the average is around £2. So it's quite a lot higher than the average. So that might be something that we target from a SEO perspective, because in theory, we start ranking really well for that, then because the clicks are organic, that means we're essentially getting free clicks. Obviously, they pay for the SEO service, but you're not paying per click. Flip side to that is, let's say, and we do get this quite a lot with Hannah, due to the nature of the product. Say the keyword is hugely difficult to rank for. So we're up against the likes of NHS and Healthline and Boots and massively authoritative websites, that realistically we're going to struggle to outrank. So an example is types of contraceptive pills. So that's a really great example of where we might use paid as our lever to get some visibility, because the cost per click for that is 70 pence, but it's really hard to rank for from an organic perspective. So just two quick examples of why and how we should be working together as two teams.
So going back now to audience targeting. So we've talked a bit about keyword targeting, but if we go back to Hannah as the example, so who is Hannah's audience? Who's going to buy an over-the-counter contraceptive pill? Well, firstly, they produced some research and audiences as to who they felt were going to buy their product. The first 18 to 24-year-olds who are yet to choose their regular method of contraception. You've then got women who use alternative methods, so regardless of age, women who use variety of different methods of contraception. And then the tertiary audience was really people who were already using the pill, which is obviously a kind of fairly good idea of three sort of stages, if you like, who the primary target audience is, and then some additional people that would also be looking to target as well. But how do we actually go about doing that? So how do we actually translate that information into digital marketing audience targeting? Now, this is really interesting because arguably, just because of somebody's age, age targeting is something which is always an interesting one. On social media, it's generally accurate because people put their date of birth in, how old they are. With Google, its accuracy can vary a little bit as well, so it can be really interesting, but it can be challenging to kind of put a persona. So if you've built this really detailed persona, it can be really difficult to then translate that onto a digital platform. And the way that we tend to do that is look at this kind of balance of what people are interested in, what they're actually looking to buy, the kind of things they have like an affinity with, what are their hobbies, what are they reading, what topics do they like. And almost, yes, maybe on social media you'd look at targeting by age, but actually thinking outside of that as well and kind of understanding what those people are likely to be looking for, searching for and interested in. And I think that's how we tend to segment audiences. So we might, for example, look at grouping them by particular groups of interest. And the reason for that is so that we can say particular things to them, or we can write particular ad copy or show them particular videos, for example. But fundamentally, we let the data decide. So that level of segmentation that we go for, it can be really, really tricky. So I think it's something which you do have to test, and rather than kind of thinking from your own experience and your hunches, it is really important to kind of validate and let the data decide, because I think that's where things can get quite tricky and it can get quite challenging. So I think that there is a real value to having personas, but we do like to validate how well they perform by using the data and how many people then go on to buy something, having been in that group or that cohort, for example.
Real. So we know who we're targeting. So how are we actually going to go and get in front of these people? So starting off with a massive part to any sort of, well, I guess you could say any sort of website, but when it comes to SEO and paid, obviously content is huge. And when it came to Hannah, in particular, it's super important that the stuff that we were saying was relevant and accurate, because obviously we don't want to get misinform people about this sort of topic. So it needed to be backed up. And then going back to sort of what we were saying earlier, so we've got all the keywords and the topics that we've assigned people's intents to those topics and keywords. It then needs to flow through into the content as well. So the content needs to match that search intent as well. And then almost going back to the first point, we needed to make sure that it was very visible on the site, that the content was verified and backed up by experts for Hannah. So this is a really strong signal when it comes to Google, but also a really strong signal for us. So if we were to go on Healthline's website, for example, you go onto any sort of blog post, it's very, very obvious that it's been verified by someone that actually knows what they're talking about. And it's very clear to see right at the top of the page. So as a person that's going onto that website, I'm like, okay, great. This is it's been backed up by experts. I don't have to worry about sort of any inaccurate information that that's on this website. And then Google also looks at those sort of signals, what we call EAT, experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. It's always a mouthful. They use those signals, and if those signals are strong, then in theory it should reward you with higher visibility in the organic rankings. So to sort of sum up this content piece, why do we do this? It essentially means that we provide people with excellent content that actually resonates to them, because we've done the research. We know that it's going to resonate with those people, which then leads to higher rankings, higher engagement rates, and it's also better from a paid perspective too. Just a really quick note about content and general experience. So we've, I'd say, struggled, but in the past we've had some fairly heated debates with some web designers, where, you know, they're like, oh God, the SEO is going to come in and they're going to muck up all of the lovely design pages that we've done with just loads of content and stuff like that. It doesn't really need to be like that. Well, it definitely doesn't need to be like that. As we mentioned, and we sort of banged on about this throughout this chat, it's all about people, and UX, or the experience on a website, is huge for people. You know, we all go on a website that is loading horrendously slow, or it's just really clunky to get around. We're off to the next website. We're off to the competitor. That can't be good from an organic ranking perspective. Now, I know Google will never admit it, but they haven't said it's a ranking signal, but surely it is, right? it makes sense for it to be a signal. So I guess the point I want to make here is that, yeah, we need to get the content on there, so it's relevant for people and it's really useful for people to go on there and read, but that's not to the detriment of messing up the experience and the design that people have worked really hard on. So it doesn't need to be a battle, and there is a balance to be had there. The next point I really want to make as well is the technical side of a website. And again, I won't go into the horrible details of technical SEO here, but a website that has good bones means that, again, us as humans, as consumers, we are going to get along much better on a website that has great technical aspects to it. So as a couple of examples, so kind of mentioned already, really, a website that is really straightforward to move around and to navigate is a great big tick in the box. Not only for us, but for Google. It's nice and easy for Google to go through and check all the pages. Then that's a really good thing. And obviously fast and responsive. So we love websites that load fast, but we also like websites that actually look great on phones, great on iPads, great on huge screens. We don't really get that huge. It's not really a huge problem at the moment now, but certainly 2-3 years ago, sort of the mobile first stuff was a real issue. Two very sort of straightforward things that we need to get over, but there's literally 100-200 different aspects when it comes to getting a website technically sound. And then lastly, we've got a website in HANA where the content is really great and technically it's really good as well. So we want to amplify that. And digital PR is a really good way of doing that. So without going into the weeds, we sort of split SEO up into 3 areas. That's the content, which we've covered, technical that we've just covered, and off-page SEO. And what off-page SEO is the terms that you might have heard of is link building and backlinks. And what they are is, let's, for example, say the BBC writes something about HANA and links to hana.co.uk. Google will see that the BBC, a really authoritative website, has made that link, and it would almost come to the conclusion of, right, BBC are really authoritative, Hannah must be authoritative as well. So I don't have to worry so much about it being untrustworthy. So because of that, in theory, it should rank Hannah higher. Now, obviously, it's a bit more to it than that. But that's kind of the fundamentals of it. And what digital PR is the nice, natural way of building links with reputable and relevant sources. Another aspect to it is also it builds awareness about a product and a brand. So when we do digital PR, we are not looking to build coverage and links with as many people as possible. It's all about the relevant sources, and where, again, kind of going back to the audience research that we've done, we want to go to the places where that audience is. So it builds awareness with those people too. And as I mentioned, with all of this, it in theory boosts organic rankings as well. And then lastly on this should all be in line with the brand and the brand guidelines that the brand marketers have set out. So we wouldn't just go to any old place. As I said, it will be in line with sort of the brand guidelines, and the way we contact these publications as well will all be within the brand guidelines too. So it's all very much aligned with everything.
And what does this mean for paid media? So we talked a little bit about audience targeting earlier and thought about how we're actually going to build and segment our audiences. But one of the biggest challenges that we now face is, as it says there, ad platforms need a lot of data to actually drive performance. Now, the reason for that is mainly because of some various different privacy updates and whatnot on things like Apple, and even now coming into Chrome, Google Chrome, where I suppose fundamentally these apps and these websites were used to getting a lot more data, and they were used to getting data about what you then did when you left their app. So this, when there was a big privacy update, probably about 3 years ago now, something like that, basically the kind of knock-on effect is that in order to get you those leads, those sales, all that revenue, that profitability, whatever it is you're looking to achieve, these ad platforms, and especially social media, I would say, but probably most things these days, they do need a fair amount of data to be able to drive performance. And what does that actually mean? Well, what it means is previously we'd be able to put, for example, that really kind of niche audience that we'd found and we'd built, and they're interested in particular areas, we'd be able to target them with ads and videos and whatnot that we knew that, or we thought that they'd be interested in, and we could test different things and see what works best and slowly kind of build performance. But actually that isn't the best way to get performance anymore. So the level of insight and the level of information that we're able to give about campaign performance has changed, and that is really challenging, because of course people want insights on what's going on. They do want to validate that brand strategy that they've either paid for or they've come up with themselves. You know, they want a verification of, are these the people that, you know, this is based on our research, but are they actually engaging with our ads? You know, are they actually engaging with our copy? So what do you do? How do you get around that? And this is where you do need to strike some sort of harmony, or some kind of middle ground, I suppose, between those two things. You need to be able to give not just the client, but yourself as well, enough information to actually understand what's driving performance, but also actually group and build campaigns in a way that are actually going to be successful and achieve your objective. There is a harmony of the two, but you do need to take into account things like budget, how much money you're willing to spend on a particular campaign or a particular objective on a particular platform, and maybe just don't spread yourself too thinly. Or alternatively, what we tend to do, which is start with everything and then refine and learn and then kind of hone it down, so you have got an understanding of what's worked. But that's a really interesting challenge that I think we do often face now with digital, you know, as a digital marketer. And when it comes to creative as well, this is a really interesting one, because I always think digital marketers, people don't really see us as particularly creative. I think they often see it as being something which is completely, perhaps maybe not a skill that we would have. But I think where we come in is, don't get me wrong, we're not going to pretend that we're, we really do see creative and people, designers and whatnot, as incredibly valuable. But where we come in is we can add that digital lens to that brief that you're creating. And what we mean by that is, you might have created like a 3-minute video that really tells the story of your brand and it really sells the product or the service that you're trying to sell. Unfortunately, it's very unlikely that anyone is going to watch your amazing 3-minute video, because sadly, it's probably a bit too long. And this is where we can come in and advise on things like the format and the length, at what point you want to say particular messaging, which particular parts of that message is going to resonate more. And if we use the classic example of TikTok, where everyone's got a short attention span and nobody watches anything over about 15 seconds, knowing that is really valuable, because then you can make that 15 seconds count. And I think that's where we come in as digital marketers. And then we can tailor, and this is again something to be aware of, we can really tailor the messaging for the platform, for the audience, and really make sure that we're saying the right things to the right people. And obviously testing and whatnot does come into that as well. And we can obviously then test all the different variations and combinations. But I think that's where creative and kind of designers and digital marketers really do come into their own when it comes to a partnership. And just to add on top of all that nice stuff, so we talked about design and all the lovely things, there is another element to this, which is navigating ad policy. Now, this is slightly less exciting, but very important nonetheless. This particularly affects, I would say, certain regulated industries. So, for example, finance or pharmaceuticals. But you do need to know what you can and can't say and to who, because for certain things like finance and pharma, you're going to have to navigate through different ad platforms, different policies. So, for example, with pharmaceuticals, so with Hannah, with the example that we use, as you would probably expect, we can't remarket basically for somebody who visits the website. We can't then show them an ad and say, oh, if you've forgotten to buy this, there's certain regulations and things we have to be aware of. So the way that we might re-engage somebody might have to be a bit more creative, it might have to be a little bit more different. So I think it's really important to know that. But when I talk about bending the rules, I guess what I really mean by that is know the rules and know what you can and can't do. So sometimes there are certain industries and areas where ad platforms are very, very strict, and there is no amount of rule bending that will ever be able to happen. So Google famously does keep its ad policies very much under wraps and doesn't really like to tell you, because if you did, you'd use it to bend the rules. But it might be that some of these ad policies are only soft exclusions. So, for example, you might be able to promote certain elements of it, or you might be able to kind of get around that. So understanding how harshly they're going to impose that, those ad policies and how well restricted they are, I think is really important. So, for example, a Google might be very, very not against doing anything like that, whereas sometimes some of the social platforms are a little bit more relaxed, perhaps. I think that's really
and this is a really good example where SEO could step in as well, isn't it, Gemma? Because again, if there's a real pool of or a topic that we do want to talk about and have visibility over, then we might not be able to do that with ads, but we could do that potentially through organic channels. So by creating content that is, I guess, accurate and things like that isn't breaking any rules, and then if we can rank organically for that, then we've got that visibility without having to go through the rigmarole of navigating ad policies.
Yeah, definitely. And follow your audience. I mean, this is a really fundamental, probably fairly basic point here, but go where your audience is. When I say follow your audience, obviously I don't mean literally, because obviously that's not a good thing to do, but I just mean don't try and make your audience go on a platform that they don't use. Really understand where your audience is. And I think a classic example at the moment is if I had £1 for every person who'd said to me that their clients or their customers aren't on TikTok, I probably would have about £10, but still enough pounds that I think actually people are questioning, do I really then have to engage in these new channels? Should I? And it's really important to not just rely on the channels you're familiar with, and look outside of that as well, and really understand, where are people spending time? Are they putting boards together on Pinterest? And is that where they start their journey when they're researching? Depending on what they're doing, what they're buying, really getting into the nitty-gritty of that can be really, really helpful. And then refine it based on data. So again, I think I alluded to it earlier, but sometimes you might start really broad and think about all the different channels. And then as you start to run campaigns and understand how they're all working together, as your organic visibility increases, it might mean that your mix of channels that you're looking to engage in might change slightly. But yeah, and the main message here, which is probably one of my favorite things, and probably the thing I love the most about digital marketing, sometimes what you think is going to work just doesn't work, because my opinion is just my opinion, Matt's opinion is just Matt's opinion. And what I love is that you can test stuff and actually you might find something you don't expect works. And that's always quite refreshing, I think, to just remind you that your opinion is only so important, which I think is always a really interesting one. So yeah, because we can test stuff, I think that's really, really, really good.
And then just to sort of hone in on this point again, sort of bringing it back to sort of the digital marketers and the brand marketers, everything that we've talked about up to now should be totally aligned with the brand. I think if you're a brand marketer and you're watching this and you're sitting there thinking, I'm not sure the digital marketers are totally aligned with what we've set out, then 100% have a word. As a digital marketer, and we've got 50 people here, I know that for a fact that everyone here would prefer if a brand marketer comes to them and said, actually guys, this isn't quite working, we'd rather work like that. So yeah, as we've mentioned, with digital PR, with ads, the way we're writing, it should all be aligned to the brand.
And bringing this all together, how do we actually measure success? So as we asked the question earlier, what does success look like? So first of all, match the objective to the goal. What we mean by that is, if the goal of your campaign is to raise awareness, make sure that that's your objective. If your goal is to get people to engage with the ad or watch a video or maybe fill in a quiz or something, again, use that objective. And the reason we say that is because you're going to get more of what you're trying to get, whether it's engagements or awareness or leads. They're going to be more effective if you choose the right objective in the first place and you're optimizing towards the goal or the thing you're trying to achieve. So I think that's a really clear thing. And also, don't benchmark the success of an awareness campaign on leads and sales, because that's not what you're trying to achieve with it. Obviously, ultimately down the line, that's what you're trying to achieve, but do make sure you've got that. And leading into that, it's that transition from soft goals all the way through to revenue and sales. So understand and start to think about all of the different things that people might do on their journey to then becoming a customer, whether that's a business or it's in a business transaction or a consumer transaction. Might be newsletter subscriptions. It might be watching a webinar like the one you're watching right now, for example. It could be reading some sort of report. It could be all number of different things. And I think measuring everything is really important, and then grading those from primary, secondary and tertiary KPIs. So basically your primary ones are probably getting people to buy stuff, revenue, profitability, all of those really crucial things. And then your secondary might be engagement and whatnot. And just to add a really fun lens onto all of this, we can't have a webinar without mentioning GA4. The deadline is imminent for the transition from Universal Analytics, the current guise, I guess, of analytics, Google Analytics to GA4. It's coming, but fundamentally, it's a blank slate. You can start again. You can tailor it and measure so many different things, from those small little video views and kind of newsletter signups all the way through to even button clicks and reading content and, you know, being on your site for a certain time, all the way through to sales and revenue. So it really allows you to, I suppose, wipe the slate clean and really think about what's important to your business and what you do want to be measuring, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting, and I'll hold my hands up when this was all announced. It's months ago now, and they released it. I was like, what on earth is this? What do I do? But I almost think it was because it was like this is gonna sound really cheesy. The possibilities are endless. You can literally measure anything you want, and because it is sort of in its infancy, there isn't that sort of hand holding. So I guess what I would say here is, you know, have a look at your website and look at it like, oh, wouldn't it be good if I could see how people are engaging with that? And if they are engaging with that, does that mean that then turns into a sale? You know, and just loads of things. Chances are you'll be able to measure it somehow in GA4.
Definitely. And then there's this balance, and especially I would say with paid media, particularly a volume versus return. So firstly, there's an acronym alert. I'm sorry, I said at the start I wouldn't use any acronyms. I'm going to use one now. But return on ad spend. What that basically means is for every pound that you put in, how many pounds you get back in return. So ideally, you put in £1, you get back £10 or £20 or whatever. But obviously an amazing return is great, but if to do it, you only sell one thing and your goal is to sell 100 things, it's probably not that great and your business probably isn't going to be successful. So it's really making sure that you balance actually getting the volume of sales and revenue that you need, and also obviously making sure that the return is at a level that is comfortable for your business as well. So I think there is that balance, and it's just to say, unfortunately, with the way automated bid strategies work, you can't just turn the taps on and you get the same, you know, more leads for the same return always. There is always a kind of limit, I suppose, as to what you're going to get. So I think it's making sure you balance those two, and taking into account margins and profitability is obviously really important as well. We can optimize for percentage margins or cash margins. Obviously, that's thinking about not just percentage wise how valuable things are to your business, but if it's worth £200-300 or whatever to your business, then making sure we look at both angles and making sure we prioritize both of those things is really important as well. And lastly, just a quick look at what can we do beyond those kind of KPIs. Well, most ad platforms these days allow you to run what's called a brand lift survey. So you can basically see, is somebody more or less likely to choose your brand having seen the ad versus not having seen an ad. That can be a really good validation of whether your messaging is hitting the right notes. So that can be interesting, and it's fairly widely available from Google to Facebook and whatnot, but actually most platforms will do this in some guise. The other tool in our tool belt, I would say, is experiments. We can test stuff, and that can give you a really important view of what's working and what's not. We can test the little stuff all the way through to the big stuff. So whether that's testing different ad copy, different videos, different imagery, through to which bid strategy is going to be more effective, this one or this one, which target is going to be better, this one or this one. We like to test everything so we ultimately make the right decisions, and that goes back to that data point. And the last point is demonstrating incrementality. So I think as measurement becomes more challenging, showing the incremental impact on your bottom line figures. So basically, when you run a mix of different channels and you're running a good solid campaign across, say, YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, what mix of media is actually going to be the most effective at giving you more sales, revenue, leads, whatever you're trying to achieve? And incrementality tests can effectively test different media mixes in different, like, geographic locations, for example, and kind of help you to understand which one's going to drive the most value. So there's loads of different ways that you can measure and understand incremental improvement, but there's just 3 kind of examples of how you can do that.
If I was to give you 3 things to take away, these would be that. Let's collaborate. So what I mean is, digital marketers, brand marketers, we make a dream team when it works, and it can work. It can always work. So let's collaborate. It makes our jobs easier ultimately, but more importantly, it makes our clients happier. So yeah, when we work together, it's really great. As I've mentioned like 5,000 times, people first rather than search engines first. If you optimize for people, the search engines in theory are going to be happy. So never think about, okay, I need to write this because I think the search engine will like it. Think about what you would want as a piece of content, or even better, think about what your audience would want. And then lastly, data is everything. Yeah, as Gemma said right at the start, we're coming across data is becoming harder and harder. There are ways around it, which we are getting around. But effectively, the more data, the better. The more data we have, the more we can share with the brand guys and the client, and vice versa. So, and it really is sort of the basis of success. So that brings us to the end. Shani, I was just wondering if we've had any questions throughout this chat.
Hi, well done both. That was great. But yeah, we have got a couple of questions. So the first one here is, do you find it difficult to get tracking and measurement to be accurate?
In a word, yes. It is a challenge. There are lots of things to navigate. I think one of the benefits of GA4 is basically data modeling. So where people have opted not to be tracked or measured, there are various different things that you can use to effectively model the behavior of people who've said, I don't want to be measured, I don't want to be tracked. So you get a view or a sense of what could have happened with those people. But it's definitely something which, check it on a fundamental basis, check is the data that you're using to make these decisions is actually accurate. How close is it to your real sales and revenue and leads and whatnot? Because if it's not accurate, you're making decisions on basically, well, who knows what you're making decisions on, unfortunately. So I think just checking and understanding how accurate it is really, really important. And it can take a lot of time and a lot of effort to get there, but I think it's definitely worth doing, because the impact it will have on how much you're spending and the value that you're driving, I think is really, really important. So yeah.
Lovely. And then just another one here from Charlotte. Is it still valuable to have a blog on a website?
Cool. Hey, Charlotte. Yeah, I think classic SEO answer, it depends, but I would say in most cases, probably. A blog is a really good platform for you to be more yourselves generally. You can sort of talk candidly about topics and things like that. Sometimes websites in their sort of generic state can be quite rigid in terms of, you think of like an e-commerce website. You have your homepage, you have your about pages, but then you have your category and product pages. Those are quite rigid in terms of what you can talk about. And then a blog kind of allows you to be yourself and talk about other things. And purely from an organic perspective and an SEO perspective, that then allows you to perhaps focus on perhaps more top of funnel topics that you want to be visible for. So, for example, taking one of our clients as an example, Greenhouses Direct, they sell greenhouses, funnily enough. We are trying to become sort of experts within the gardening space. So we're using our blog, to try and do that. And that's all based on keyword research and audience research and things like that. The big thing I would say to this, though, is don't have it for the sake of it. Almost going back to the data point. If you don't know whether your audience would resonate with, or your content on a blog would resonate with the audience that you're targeting, then probably don't do it. I still hear a lot from people that, yeah, we're just doing, 5 blog posts a week because that's the thing you do, 8 best things to do in your greenhouse. Like, it's just rubbish content. No one's gonna read. So I'd definitely go over quality over quantity, and for that blog content to be totally based on the end goal and the audience that you're focusing on.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much to everyone who's joined us. We are going to pop the recording on our website, so check it out or feel free to share with your network. But thank you, Gemma and Matt. That was brilliant.
Nice one. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers,
Thanks.
Ronnie.
Bye.
Bye.